All right. If you're not there, you can follow along on the notes. The notes have a description of the steps we're going to go through. So the first step, once you're in this graphing calculator, is we need to enter a table into here. So click on this plus sign in the upper left. When you hover above it, it says Add Item. And then clicking on it lets you then click on Table. We're going to enter a table into Desmos. And so go ahead and flip over your notes. Part 1, number 1 is on the back side. And you have a table with X values and Y values. We're going to copy this into Desmos. So our first X value is 10. You guys see the table I'm talking about? What's your second X value? Goes from 10 to 20, multiples of 10, right? And if you press enter, it'll keep extending that, and it starts to notice the pattern. And you can let it autofill. So 30, yes, 40, 50, all the way to 70. We'll fill in our Y values. What's your first Y value on that part 1, number 1 on the notes? Make sure that you guys are in the right place, then that you're following along. 5, and then 6. Doesn't seem to be as much of a pattern here, so you'll have to fill in all of these. And I already had mine set over here, my the graph side of it. But if you don't see these dots, you can zoom out so that your numbers get bigger. And every time that we put in a new number over here, another dot shows up. So each of our ordered pairs in the table corresponds with one of the dots. I'm going to switch over to the worksheet here. We did steps 1, 2, and 3. Step 4 and 5 is optional. That's if you can't see your dots, you can't see where it's graphing what you're inputting. And label that as optional. That way when you're using these to guide you through, you don't necessarily have to do this step, but you can change around your view of your graph. So we'll go ahead and take a look at step 6. After we've created our table, now we're going to tell Desmos to find a line of best fit. We dealt with lines of best fit when we were doing linear equations, straight lines that best fit are scatter plots. We also called these lines of best fit regression lines. Go ahead and write the word regression. Regression has to do with the process of calculating this line. It's the least distance between all of the points. Let's see here. This is going to be how we create that regression line. We'll come back to that. It says write an equation of your exponential regression again. Good chance if I'm repeating something over and over, good chance it's going to show up on like a test or a quiz. And so when you see the word regression line, you just know that's your line of best fit. It's a line that we try to use to connect our dots. After we have created that line, Desmos is going to tell us about a thing called a correlation coefficient. Go ahead and give yourself correlation. Coefficient. Correlation coefficient symbolized by r squared, and it's a number between 0 and 1. It's the same thing we talked about it during linear equations. If your scatter plot has no pattern to it, if it's random dots, then it's going to be something like a 0 correlation coefficient. If those dots are perfectly lined up, or in the case of exponential equations, a perfect curve, then that has a correlation of 1. So 1 is perfect, 0 is no correlation. Correlation just means the connection. The connection between our data, the scatter plot, and the line, the equation. All right, so let's go ahead and go back over to our Desmos. And we're going to start creating an equation. Go ahead and click underneath your table. It'll tell you like box 2. And we're going to type that equation that was on the front of your notes. It started with a y. And then we're going to put a little subscript underneath of it. You can type shift minus, and that shifts your cursor down, and then put a 1. We just want these variables, it says x sub 1 and y sub 1, we want them to match exactly. So that's why we put this subscript underneath of it. And again, subscript isn't telling you to do any math. It's just saying this is our first y. If I have multiple tables and multiple equations in here, I want to keep track of which y variables I'm talking about. So to get out of the subscript, you press your over arrow, and now we've got our cursor is big again. Instead of an equal sign, we're going to do this tilde, which is at the very left-hand side of your keyboard, very, very left side. Press shift, and then that little curly line. Normally, if we plug in an equal sign, that'll be telling Delta Math that, hey, graph this equal sign, or this equation with an equal sign in it. But when we have a tilde like this, we're asking Desmos, I said Delta Math, Desmos to create a line for us. That line is going to have an A in it, so type A after your tilde. You can also find that little curly line by using the on-screen keyboard. If you go here, ABC, here's your subscript. You could use the subscript down here instead of shift minus. And then over here is your tilde. We're going to multiply A times B. How do you get multiplication sign on Desmos? Shift 8 is one way to do it. That's that asterisk. The little tiny star means multiply. You can also use the online keyboard and click the multiplication. We don't need 2 multiplication dots there. So you can do it either way. Give yourself a B, and then we're going to raise it to a power, since it's an exponential equation. Again, there's 2 methods. On-screen keyboard, here's your exponent button, or shift 6. Just above the 6, there's that carrot top or arrow. If you press shift 6, it boosts your cursor up above there, so we can plug in an exponent of x, and then either type shift minus sign, or on your on-screen keyboard, here's your little subscript button down here. We can click that, type a 1. And we just asked Desmos to create an equation that's an exponential equation. It's got an exponent in it that is the line of best fit for our table. So as soon as you type that 1 in there, that very last part, hopefully you got a line that showed up. Everybody get a line that connects your dots? It doesn't connect them perfectly. It looks like this dot is a little bit too high, but it's a pretty good fit, better than a straight line would be. So it also calculates the 2 values, A and B. If we plug in those 2 numbers into the equation we have here, then we will have the equation, that line of best fit. So I'm going to go back over to the worksheet. Actually, this is the notes. So this is the back side of the notes. This is the table that you guys should have put into Desmos. And we're going to put our A and B values. So starting with the A value, what's the number that it says A is equal to in your Desmos graphing calculator?
Um, 0.74.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop at 3 digits behind the decimal. It tells us eventually we're going to round all values to the hundredths place. The hundredths means we only need 2, but we need to know that third digit to tell us whether we're going to round up or down. We'll do that in a second after we're starting to create our equation. We also need a B value for our equation. What is our B value that Desmos calculated for us? 1.078. And thank you for giving me 3 digits. And so the generic form of a exponential equation, we can start off with an f of x, and we're going to say it's equal to a times b to the x power. All of your equations are going to be of this form, but we're going to plug in values, the ones that they give us, in for a and b. So our final draft of this equation, if we only want 2 digits behind the decimal, should we keep it as 0.74 or round up to 0.75?
5.
Up to 5, right? Anytime the number that you're going to cut off is 5 or greater, then we round up. Of course, if this was a 4 or less, we'd keep it as 0.74. We're going to now multiply times b. So this number, what should I round this number to?
8.
Yep, since we got an 8 here, this number would be closer to 1.08 than it would be to 1.07. We're almost done. What's the very last thing you need to do for an exponential equation?
An exponent.
We need that exponent on top, right? You got to have a variable so that there's somewhere to plug in your x values, and then you can get your f of x or your y value. So we came up with our regression equation. We still need to find our correlation coefficient. We don't need to calculate it. We just need to copy it from what Desmos calculated. So somewhere in there with your a and your b, there's an r squared. What's our r squared value?
0.994.
And I guess since they want us to round it, if you have a squiggly equal sign like this, that means approximately equal to. And it's approximately equal to 1.00. I don't like this answer because a correlation coefficient of 1 means it's a perfect fit. And it wasn't a perfect fit. It was a little bit off. So I guess go ahead and put 1 as your answer, but I like to see this number as well. It's a little bit less than 1, meaning it does not hit all of our points perfectly. So those are your answers. We've got a little bit of work to show, but most of the work is typing in the table and then letting Desmos do the calculations for you. So I'm thinking this will be enough, this one example, to get you on a good start on the worksheet. So take a look at the top of your worksheet. It's part number 1. Number 2, Desmos won't let you enter a horizontal table like this. So you need to make sure all of your x values are the multiples of 100 here, 10, 100, 200, 300. So we can get rid of the original table that we had. So there's a little x here. You can go ahead and get rid of that. Do not get rid of the equation we came up with. We can reuse this. And it was kind of a pain to type it in there. So it would be better not to have to retype it. If you do get rid of it on accident, you can undo and bring it back. But let's go ahead and create another table for problem number 2. How do we create a table? To turn it in, just put it in the back. What do we do to create a new table?
Press the plug.
Plus sign and table. And so since this is your second table, it gives us a second x and a second y value. We want to line those up exactly with this. So click behind your 2, backspace it, and put a 1 in there. So go ahead and change both of these. You could just delete all of the numbers in your original table, or you can delete the whole table and then make sure that you have x sub 1 and y sub 1 across from it. Those were a bunch of numbers in the hundreds: 100, 200, 300. And so you're going to have to flip that table, right? But do make sure that your x values, the numbers on top, are the values that end up on the left-hand side. So I'll let you guys continue typing in those numbers. As soon as you finish the table, if you kept this equation here, then your A and B values will automatically pop up down here. And then just follow the examples from the notes. There we go. Follow these examples. Once you have A and B values, you can come up with your equation and also write your correlation coefficient. Let me know if you're having any problems as you're doing this.